Competent, secure attachment leads to better outcomes for children. This aspect of attachment theory has been less cross-culturally documented than universality, normavity, and sensitivity. But there is evidence from Western and non-Western societies that secure attachment is associated with better outcomes for children. For example, Gusel and Chilean infants who were classified as securely attached were better nourished than those with insecure attachments. Kerr, Molan and Liederman, 1986, Venezuela, 1997. However, based on those associations alone, we can't say whether secure attachment causes better nutrition or that healthy infants are more likely to cause more sensitive parenting, especially in situations of economic deprivation when parents are forced to be selective in their investment of time and energy. Overall, the research suggests that whether children perceive themselves as being loved and accepted is more important than well-being than the specific behaviors parents use to convey their love. Children use this template of love and affection, or the lack of it, in the future relationships. For example, adults who use aggression in social situations are more likely to have children who behave aggressively. Huseman and Kerwell, 2007. If the overall parenting style is warm and loving, children are more likely to regard their parents as having legitimate authority to direct their behavior and more compliant with their parents' requests than the internalized parents' messages more fully. Darling, et al., 2005. Cross-culturally, there is some evidence for an association between attachment style and developmental outcomes for children, but much more work needs to be done to understand cause and effect in this area. Overall, cross-cultural attachment research suggests there are universal trends expressed in culturally specific ways. Are children mind readers? Recap and consolidation. Tom is the capacity to picture the world from another person's point of view. What they see, know, want, desire, or believe. At around 9 months of age, infants with basic Tom ability, understanding that other people pursue their own goals and can have a different perspective on the world than they do. Dyadic and triadic social interactions are important contexts in which children learn about the minds of others. By around 4 years of age, infants become a more advanced Tom ability, being able to hold mutually incompatible ideas about other people's beliefs, their own knowledge, and reality. Acquiring Tom has far-reaching social consequences for children's development. Tom helps people coordinate their intentions towards common goals and allows complex cooperation. When a capacity is estimated to emerge in development, partly depends on how we measure it. False beliefs across the world. As we learned in Chapter 3, compared with other species, humans show an extraordinary ability to infer the beliefs of others, and in particular to recognize that others may hold and act on false belief. It has been proposed that this Tom is a universal part of our human nature, giving us an advantage when it comes to cooperating, competing, and communicating with, as well as learning from others. If that's true, we might expect to see this skill emerging in a similar way for children across the world. Biological anthropologist H. Clark Barrett and his colleagues set out to determine whether this is true or not in three diverse traditional non-Western cultures. The Salar, who are a Turkish-speaking ethnic minority in rural northwest China and who live in a small traditional settlement, and the Shua Kolono community, which represent a mix of native Amazonian Shua, who are traditionally hunter horticulturists and Ecuadorian immigrants from the Andes colonial, both of whom now practice small-scale agriculture in the rural Amazon region. Barrett et al. 2013. They gave 1 to 4-year-olds from these societies a set of tests that assessed their false beliefs understanding. For example, in one task, children sat opposite an experimenter, E1, who showed the children 2 containers, one with a pair of scissors hidden in it, and one with nothing in it. E1 took the scissors out of the container and cut up some stickers, put the scissors back in the same container, and left the room for a second experimenter, E2, arrived. E2 also used the scissors, cut up some stickers, but she then put the scissors in her own pocket. E2 then looked thoughtful and said, when E1 name comes back, she is going to need her scissors again. Where will she think they are? If the children are tracking E1's false belief, they should expect her to look for the scissors in the container she left them in. If children are tracking their own beliefs, they should expect her to look for her scissors in E2's pocket as soon as E2 asked the question about where E1 would look. The young children across all societies looked reliably longer at the container, as if the infants were anticipating where E1 would look also, even though they knew E1's beliefs was false. The researchers also recorded other non-verbal and verbal responses, but the pattern was the same. Early false belief understanding of non-Western children was comparable with that of Western children, pointing to a remarkable degree of similarity. A different study that involved children from Canada, India, Peru, Samoa, and Thailand found the same degree of similarity in the way false belief understanding emerged in childhood. Callaghan et al. 2005. Key point. Across diverse cultures, false belief understanding emerges in a similar way. How do children learn language? Recap and consolidation. Before birth and after, children are becoming sensitized to the sounds in their native language and insensitive to those that are not. Children use powerful pattern detection skills to segment speech streams into words. Child-directed speech differs in important ways from adult to adult speech and has been shown to help language learning. Cross-linguistically, the types of first words children use show some similar characteristics and some differences shaped by cognitive, social, and linguistic factors. Children learn grammar incrementally by bleeding simple grammar that expresses simple ideas like agent action and action object into more complex forms like agent action object. Through their play, exploration, and social interaction, children use a variety of strategies to understand what words mean. Overgeneralization errors are powerful instructions of creative power of language and mechanisms children use to learn it. Does the language you speak affect the way you think? As we have learned, there are over 7,000 languages in the world, and children appear equally capable of learning any one of them. Recall that before birth and after, children are becoming sensitized to the sound of their native language and insensitive to those that are not. But does the language you learn also make you insensitive to some types of thinking? Before we answer that, let's look at the relation between language and thought. Very young infants and many other animals are capable of complex thinking, even when they have no language. It is possible to translate between languages that have very different words, which would be difficult if words were the same things as what they meant. People have ideas that are difficult to put into words. This wouldn't happen if language was thought, as you could just say what you meant. If language was thought, people could never invent new words because there would be no way of imagining their meaning. Ambiguous phrases like kids make notorious snacks wouldn't be ambiguous if language was thought. So you can rule out the idea that language is exactly the same thing as thought if that were true. Some languages would make some kinds of thoughts impossible for children to think. Key point: language isn't the same thing as thought, and there is no evidence that language you speak makes some thoughts impossible. But there is evidence that the language children speak makes some types of thinking more likely than others. How we talk about the position of objects in the world around us is one example. If I were to describe where my keys are to you, I could say they are in front of the coffee cup, an intrinsic frame of reference. I could say they are on my left, a relative frame of reference, or I could say that they are to the east, an obsolete frame reference. All three frames of reference are used by humans across cultures, but in some cultures and languages are more likely to use one system than another. In Dutch, like English, the dominant spatial frames of reference are the intrinsic and relative, whereas in Zeltal, a Mayan language spoken in Mexico, the obsolete frame of reference is more dominant. Linguist Stephen Levinson set out to test how this difference in language affected the way Dutch and Zeltal speakers thought about positions of objects. 1996. He designed an experiment in which participants were shown objects organized in a row. Figure 6.3 left. The participants were then rotated 180 degrees and asked to remake the arrangement of objects. Figure 6.3 right. The Dutch speakers arranged the items according to an egocentric frame of reference, e.g., circle on the left, triangle on the right, figure 6.3, while the Zeltal speakers appeared to use an obsolete frame, circle south of triangle. To understand why the speakers differed, we need to understand a bit more about Zetal speaker homeland. Zetal is spoken in a mountainous area where many ridges and cross-cutting valleys, and with a tendency for the land to decline towards the north. Using the local geography is an efficient way to communicate where something is. Downhill comes to mean north, uphill means south, and across can mean either east or west. But to avoid confusion in the latter case, speakers often refer to other landmarks. Obviously, this system relies on a good sense of direction, and the ZTAL speakers can reliably point in a specific direction for down, i.e. north, but they can also point in the same direction when they are out of their territory, or even when they can't see the environment. The ZTAL speakers, if they wanted to describe where their keys are, the English statement, the keys are in front of the cup or they are left of me, are not possible, but they might say uphill, or if you wanted to ask where someone is going, they might say ascending, going south. These findings and others like them do not mean that people are unable to use frames of reference that their language does not use. Left-right distinction is still learnable for the ZTAL speakers. What the research does suggest is that early on, infants are sensitive to a wide range of spatial distinctions, and over the course of development, children develop biases towards certain distinctions, specifically those encoded in their language. So the language we speak can deeply affect the way we think about spatial relations and other aspects of our experience, including color, number, and motion. Wolf and Holmes, 2011. Beyond language, children's everyday experiences also affect the ways that they think about spatial relationships. For example, Logoli children in Kenya live in communities that routinely explore the local area extensively. Researchers have found that the distance these children regularly travelled from their village predicted their skill in solving more abstract mathematical spatial problems. Munro and Munro, 1971. This is a good example of how differences in cultural practices become embedded in children's thinking. Key point: long-term use of practical language causes children to focus on certain aspects of experience to the exclusion of others.